At 32, he lay dying while the most powerful generals on earth hovered outside his door, because if he named the wrong successor, the empire would explode. He'd conquered more land, faster, than anyone in human memory, and now a single unanswered question could turn victory into civil war. So what did he say, when the future demanded a plan? To understand that door in Babylon, you have to start with a different door, the one he kicked open the moment his father was murdered. In 336 BC, Alexander III inherits a kingdom, an army, and a Greek alliance held together by fear. And almost immediately, the whole structure trembles. Macedon isn't just a crown, it's a machine built by Philip II, long pikes, drilled infantry, shock cavalry, and a court that binds nobles to the king through reward and risk. Alexander inherits the engine, but he also inherits the problem. Greece is not unified, it's compliant. And compliance can vanish overnight. That's why his first campaign isn't east, toward Persia, it's south, toward the Greek cities watching for weakness. When Thebes revolts, ancient writers like Diadochi and Plutarch describe what follows as a warning written in fire and rubble. The message is simple: test this king, and you lose everything. With Greece stunned into silence, Alexander turns to the project his father framed as a Panhellenic war, crossing into Asia. But this isn't a mythic march into the unknown, it's a calculated opening move against Persian power in the west. One crossing, one beachhead, and the clock starts ticking for an empire that relies on distance. At the Granicus River, Arrian paints a reckless moment. Alexander drives straight into a defended crossing, gambling that speed will beat preparation. The water churns, the line breaks, and suddenly the war becomes personal, king against satraps, bodyguards against bodyguards. And the campaign's tone is set in a single violent decision. Victories like Granicus don't just kill men, they flip loyalties. Cities open gates, treasuries change hands, and the Macedonian army eats, pays, and marches on. Modern historians remind us this is logistics as much as genius: roads, supply, discipline, and the institutional depth Philip built. But Alexander's real weapon is tempo, and it's accelerating. The Persian Empire he's attacking isn't a cartoon villain. It's an administrative giant, satrapies, tribute, royal roads, and a court ideology that makes the great king the center of order. Pierre Bryant and others stress its resilience, but also its vulnerability when legitimacy wavers. And Alexander is aiming not just at armies, but at the idea of kingship itself. The first time he meets that kingship face to face is at Issus. Darius III arrives with the weight of empire behind him, and leaves in a rupture that ancient sources frame as decisive. When the Persian line breaks, the king's chariot turns, and the battlefield suddenly becomes a political earthquake. And the aftershock is waiting in a tent. Inside that tent are Darius's mother, wife, and children, captured, alive, and suddenly the most dangerous symbols in the war. Arrian and Plutarch emphasize Alexander's clemency, not as softness, but as calculation. He treats them like royalty because he wants to inherit what they represent. But mercy can be a weapon that cuts both ways. Now the obvious move is to chase Darius. Alexander doesn't. He turns south, toward the coastline, because Persian naval power depends on ports. This is the part that looks less heroic and more strategic. Deny the fleet its bases, and the sea stops being Persian. But to do that, he has to break cities that refuse to bend. Tyre is the siege that exposes the hidden spine of conquest. It's not a cavalry charge, it's engineering, exhaustion, and stubborn stone. Arrian and Diadochi describe months of labor, a causeway built under fire, towers pushed forward, the sea itself turned into a battlefield. And when the wall finally cracks, so does something in the army. Gaza follows, another brutal gate on the road south. Each siege teaches the same lesson: speed is expensive, and resistance makes the bill higher. The army wins, but it also learns to expect that victory can mean weeks of digging, dying, and waiting. And Alexander learns something too: fear works, until it doesn't. Then, almost like a dream between battles, Egypt opens. Alexander is crowned with local legitimacy, founds a city that will bear his name, and walks into the desert toward the oracle at Siwa. Arrian and Plutarch report the visit, modern historians debate the messaging. But whatever was said there, it changes how he carries himself afterward. By 331 BC, the war rushes back to its central question: who gets to be king of Asia? At Gaugamela, Darius prepares the ground, gathers manpower, and tries to make the battlefield itself a weapon. Arrian frames it as Alexander's tactical control, timing, angles, the moment a gap appears. But the real target is the crown. The decisive moment comes like a knife. Companion cavalry surges, not straight into the center, but into the seam, where order is weakest. Dust swallows everything. Then, as at Issus, the Persian king turns away, and the empire's nerve center goes numb. The battle ends, But the conquest has only reached its most dangerous phase. Babylon opens its gates. Then Susa. Then Persepolis, names that sound like treasure, and are. Gold and silver flood the camp, and with them comes a new problem. Alexander is no longer just defeating Persia. He is sitting in Persia's throne rooms, wearing the weight of its rituals, and asking his Macedonians to follow him there. This is the turning point the battles can't show. Arrian describes tensions over proskynesis, court gestures of submission, and the adoption of Persian dress and ceremony. To Persians, these are the grammar of authority. To many Macedonians, they feel like betrayal. The war is shifting from conquest to governance, and governance is a fight inside the tent. And then Persepolis burns. Arrian and Plutarch both report it, but they don't agree on why: revenge, accident, theater, or something darker. Flames climb carved stone, smoke rolls through halls built to last forever, and the act becomes a message no one can fully control. The question is, who was Alexander trying to speak to? Darius is still alive, which means legitimacy is still contested. Alexander launches a pursuit across distances that feel unreal: roads, mountains, deserts, driven by the need to capture the man who embodies the old order. But the Persian court is fracturing, satraps recalculating, allies turning into rivals. And the king he's chasing is slipping through a collapsing world. When Darius is finally found, it's not in glory. Ancient accounts describe him dying after betrayal by his own men, and Alexander positioning himself as the avenger, punishing the killers, claiming the mantle. Bryant emphasizes what's really happening: a contest over Persian royal authority. Alexander doesn't just defeat a dynasty, he steps into its vacancy. Now the map says the war should be over. But the ground disagrees. In Bactria and Sogdiana, the campaign becomes a grinding fight of fortresses, ambushes, and guerrilla resistance. Arrian's narrative turns into a sequence of hard climbs and harder reprisals. This is where the myth of effortless conquest starts to crack. And the cracks spread upward. The farther east they go, the more the army becomes a mixed instrument: Macedonians, Greeks, and increasing numbers of local troops and nobles pulled into the new order. Alexander needs them to hold territory. His officers fear replacement. You can see it in who gets promoted, who gets honored, who gets ignored. And in this atmosphere, one mistake becomes unforgivable. Arrian and Plutarch preserve the moment where the court turns poisonous: a drunken argument, a friend's criticism, and Alexander killing Clytus in a flash of rage. It's not just tragedy, it's a signal that power has changed him, or at least exposed him. The king who once shared danger now demands a different kind of obedience. And the room goes quiet in a new way. In this long Eastern war, Hephaestion becomes more than a friend. He's a stabilizer, the man beside Alexander in councils and marches, the familiar presence in a court that's becoming crowded and suspicious. Ptolemy is there too, the staff officer watching decisions become policy. But even the closest circle can't keep the campaign from changing its commander. And the next shift comes through marriage. Alexander marries Roxana in 327 BC, part alliance, part statement that the new empire will be stitched together through people, not just garrisons. For some, it's pragmatic. For others, it's the clearest sign he's becoming something else, not merely king of Macedon, but a ruler of many nations. And that identity shift will soon collide with the army's limits. Then India, an entire new theater beyond the Persian world he set out to conquer. Monsoon skies, swollen rivers, unfamiliar kingdoms, and the same old requirement: move faster than the enemy can organize. At the Hydaspes, Arrian gives the fullest account: a risky crossing in storm and darkness, then a battle where timing matters more than numbers. But victory here has a different taste. King Porus fights hard enough that Alexander can't treat him like a defeated satrap. He keeps him, elevates him, uses him, because the farther east you go, the more conquest depends on cooperation. It's an imperial logic, not a battlefield impulse. And it tells you Alexander is thinking about rule, not just raids. The problem is, his soldiers are thinking about home. At the Hyphasis River, the march stops. Arrian treats it as a decisive confrontation. Alexander wants to go farther, the army refuses. Not mutiny with weapons, something colder, exhausted men saying no, because distance has finally beaten ambition. Alexander argues, isolates himself, returns, and orders a turn back. But what does a conqueror become when the world won't keep expanding? The return isn't a victory lap, it's a punishment delivered by geography. The Grosian Desert becomes the episode everyone remembers as suffering: thirst, heat, lost wagons, men dropping out of line and never getting up again. Ancient sources describe catastrophic hardship. Modern historians debate motives and scale. But nobody doubts the psychological damage. And the empire limps west with a new kind of fear. When they reach cities again, Alexander tries to consolidate: audits, new satraps, veteran settlements, and a court that looks more Persian by the day. The conquest is becoming administration, and administration is becoming theater. Who stands closest, who speaks first, who gets to touch the king? Ptolemy watches these shifts like a man taking notes for a future that isn't written yet. And then comes the mass wedding. At Susa in 324 BC, Alexander orchestrates marriages between his officers and Persian noblewomen, an attempt to fuse elites into one ruling class. Arrian frames it as integration. Many Macedonians see coercion and erasure. It's a policy you can watch backfire in real time. Smiles held too long, hands reluctant at the vow, eyes looking past the ceremony. Because if identity is forced, loyalty becomes fragile. If you're enjoying how we're telling this, fast, close to the decisions, and honest about the uncertainty, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps us keep making long-form history that doesn't flatten people into heroes or villains. Because the next turning point isn't a battle at all, it's a confrontation between a king and his own army. At Opis, the resentment finally erupts. Arrian describes a mutiny sparked by Alexander's decision to send veterans home and elevate more Asians. Men hear replacement, not reward. The crowd shouts, the officers hesitate. Seleucus stands in the pressure zone between command and rank. Alexander's response isn't just anger, it's performance, a courtroom drama staged to break the rebellion's spine. And it almost fails. He dismisses them, threatens them, then turns reconciliation into ritual, public tears, shared feasting, the king embracing the very men who challenged him. Its power reasserting itself through emotion, not steel. But even when the mutiny ends, the lesson remains: the army is no longer an extension of his will. It's a political body with limits. And Alexander is running out of ways to ignore that. Then the most personal support beam snaps. Hephaestion dies, and the sources agree on the effect even when they differ on details. Alexander's grief is volcanic. The court becomes darker, more isolated, more brittle. A commander who once had a second mind beside him now has only echoes. And when you remove the one person who could steady the king, you don't just lose a friend, you destabilize an empire. By the time the army returns to Babylon, the conquest feels less like momentum and more like strain held together by habit. Babylon is a hub of roads and canals, a place where an empire can be managed, if management is possible. Alexander drafts plans, receives envoys, reshuffles commands. Ptolemy, Seleucus, and the other senior men are close enough to smell succession in the air. And Roxana's pregnancy makes the question sharper. Because what is the empire now? It's not a single nation. It's a chain of garrisons, satraps, treasuries, and personal loyalties stretched from the Aegean to the edge of India. It works because Alexander is alive, because his presence is the final court of appeal. Remove him, and every decision becomes negotiable. And in Babylon, his body begins to fail. Ancient sources disagree on the cause: fever, illness, other theories, but they agree on the scene: days of worsening weakness, the court circling, the army outside desperate for certainty. The silence around the bed is not reverence, it's calculation. Men who conquered continents are suddenly reduced to waiting for a breath. And the most important order of his life is the one he doesn't clearly give. When commanders ask about succession, later tradition preserves a chilling ambiguity, answers that sound like riddles, or like refusal. There is no adult heir. There is a half-brother, Philip Arrhidaeus, not fully fit to rule. There is Roxana, pregnant with a child not yet born. And there are the generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and others, each holding pieces of the machine that makes power real. So who inherits an empire built on one man's speed? The moment he dies, the heir changes. Not grief first, organization. Guards shift. Messengers are held. Meetings happen in corners, then in rooms, then in formal councils. Diadochi describes the scramble that follows: a settlement, a compromise, a patchwork monarchy meant to buy time. But time is exactly what the generals intend to use. And the first cracks appear before the body is even cold. They name kings on paper, Arrhidaeus and the unborn Alexander IV. But paper doesn't command armies, men do. The empire is too big, the treasury's too tempting, the distances too forgiving for rebellion. The officers who once executed Alexander's orders now have to decide which orders were truly his, and which were merely convenient. And that question turns allies into predators. This is why the story can't end with the last breath. Alexander's conquest doesn't conclude, it fractures. The wars of the successors will turn his commanders into rival kings and turn his unified campaign into competing states. The Hellenistic world, Ptolemies in Egypt, Seleucids in Asia, power struggles in Macedon, will be built from the wreckage of one missing plan. But the real twist is how much of Persia survives inside the new order. Because the Achaemenid Empire wasn't erased, it was repurposed. Roads still carried messages. Taxes still moved. Satrapal structures still shaped rule, even when Greek became the language of courts. Alexander had tried to inherit Persian kingship. His successors institutionalized the hybridity, sometimes by choice, sometimes because you can't govern these lands without the tools that already work. And that's the irony: conquest created continuity. Look back at the beginning and you can see the shape of the ending. Speed wins battles, but it also outruns cohesion. Every victory adds territory, yes, but also adds elites to manage, garrisons to pay, and soldiers to keep believing. Alexander's genius was operational, forcing decisions before enemies could breathe. His failure, if we can call it that, was constitutional, no stable mechanism to survive him. And the empire he built becomes a question mark with borders. Even the sources reflect the fracture. Arrian writes like a soldier, focused on decisions and discipline, drawing on Ptolemy and Aristobulus. Plutarch writes to explore character, turning moments into moral tests. Diadochi preserves the political chaos that follows. And between them, the same man can look like a visionary, a tyrant, a pragmatist, or a warning. The only thing they agree on is the scale of what was left behind, and how unstable it was. So when we return to that corridor in Babylon, the tension isn't just that a great man is dying. It's that everyone knows the empire is a temporary miracle held together by his lungs. Ptolemy doesn't need a prophecy to understand it. Seleucus doesn't need permission to imagine a future. Roxana doesn't need a crown to be a threat. The plan is supposed to be spoken aloud, yet the room offers only silence. And silence is an invitation. Because the most dangerous thing a conqueror can do is die without instructions. Not because nobody loved him, but because too many people needed him. The army needed pay and purpose. The satrapies needed appointments that wouldn't be overturned tomorrow. The generals needed legitimacy for whatever they planned next. And the world he'd remade needed a center that could hold, yet the center was a single heartbeat. And it stopped. If you zoom out, the achievement is still staggering. In roughly a decade, Alexander's campaigns ran from the Hellespont to the Indus, toppling the Achaemenid dynasty and planning new cities, new garrisons, new networks. But if you zoom in, the ending is almost mundane. Officials arguing, seals breaking, orders countermanded, loyalties reassigned. History often turns not on the grand charge, but on the administrative vacuum after the charge. And that vacuum is where the real war begins. The Hellenistic age that follows is not a clean Greek triumph. It's a layered world, Greek-speaking courts ruling over ancient landscapes, using older systems, negotiating with local elites, and sometimes crushing them. New coinage, new cities, new armies, yes. But also continuity in taxation, roads, and imperial habit. Alexander didn't just change borders, he changed what power looked like from Egypt to Mesopotamia. And the price of that change was paid for generations. And that brings us back to the simplest, hardest fact. By 32, Alexander had taken more territory than any human being in history, then left no clear plan to keep it. Not because he didn't think about the future, but because he built a future that required him to be immortal. The torchlit sprint outran its own ending. And in the quiet after the sprint, the world listened for instructions that never came. If you want more episodes that stay close to the sources and still feel like a human story, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what moment hit you hardest. And if this ending, the empire with no instructions, stuck with you, comment no plan left below. That single phrase is the shadow Alexander cast over everyone who came after him.